She ran into me before I even made it through the lobby. I had spent 11 hours on a plane, 3 hours in transit, and 40 minutes in the back of a cab, rehearsing how I was going to walk into the office, set my bag down like nothing had happened, and pretend the last 4 months hadn't quietly rearranged something I wasn't ready to name yet. I had a plan. The plan lasted as long as it took her to see me through the glass doors. She didn't say anything. She just crossed the distance between us, fast. Too fast. The kind of fast that doesn't leave room for second thoughts, and walked straight into my chest. Her arms went around me, and she pressed her face against my shoulder, and I felt her breathe. Just breathe, like she had been holding something in, and had only just remembered she didn't have to anymore. I stood there with my bag still on my shoulder, and my arms slowly going around her, and I thought, you were not supposed to come back from this trip the same man who left. I don't think I did. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 35. I work in structural consulting, the kind of job where clients pay you to tell them why their building is wrong before it expresses that opinion itself. It is a job that takes you overseas often, keeps you in conference rooms for long hours, and gives you exactly the kind of professional distance that felt, at 35, like a reasonable substitute for a real life. Her name was Sylvie Okafor, my boss for 2 years and 8 months before any of this happened. She was 39, though you'd only know that if you asked, and most people didn't, because Sylvie moved through a room the way people who are comfortable in their own skin move through rooms, like she had already decided how things were going to go. She wore her hair natural, kept her desk ruthlessly clean except for one corner, dedicated entirely to a rotating collection of ceramic mugs she brought from home, and had the specific talent of making you feel, in any meeting, that the most important thing happening in that room was the thing you were saying. She was also my manager, which meant she was, objectively, off limits, which meant I had spent the better part of 8 months telling myself that what I was feeling was professional admiration, and doing it with a straight face, and almost believing it. We had started working together when I joined the firm. Our first conversation lasted 20 minutes longer than it needed to, and ended with her asking, completely unprompted, whether I'd ever read a certain paper on load distribution she thought I'd argue with. I had read it. I did argue with it. She laughed like a woman who had been waiting for someone to finally disagree with her correctly, and that was more or less how it went from there. I told myself it was collegial. I had poor survival instincts around brilliant women. This was a known condition. I was managing it. Then they sent me to Lagos for 4 months, and managing it became considerably harder. The overseas contract was large, a commercial tower, a compressed timeline, a client who communicated primarily through terse emails and last-minute additions to scope. Sylvie had recommended me for it herself. She'd sat across from me in her office, slid the project brief across the desk, and said, I think this one has your name on it. I'd said, 4 months is a long time. She'd said, it is, in the tone of someone agreeing with a fact they were deliberately not adding anything to. The night before I left, there was a small office send-off. Someone brought a cake. There was a card. Sylvie had signed it, the only one who had written more than her name, though I didn't read what she wrote until I was in the cab to the airport, when it was already too late to do anything useful with the information. Come back with good stories. The office is quieter than it should be when you're not in it. That sentence did something quiet to the room. The room was a cab. I was alone in it. It still counted. The 4 months were long. The project was harder than expected. The client's last-minute revisions became a running joke between Sylvie and me across the 11-hour time difference. She would send me an email at 7 in the evening her time, and I would wake up to it at 2 in the morning mine. And I started setting an alarm, just so I could respond while it was still fresh. I told myself it was professional diligence. It was not professional diligence. It was that reading her emails was the best part of my day, and I had stopped pretending otherwise. Somewhere around week 6, when pretending had started to feel like actual effort. We talked about the project. We talked about a case study she was preparing. We talked once about a novel she was reading that she described as frustrating in exactly the right ways, and she sent me a photo of a specific page she thought I should read, and I read it 4 times. I was supposed to be there until the end of the month. Then the client consolidated the final review phase. The timeline compressed, and I was done 2 weeks early. I booked the flight back without telling anyone. I told myself I needed the time to decompress. I did not examine this too closely. The cab from the airport dropped me outside the office at 10:40 on a Tuesday morning. I had a suitcase. I had 4 months of project files. I had not slept properly in 36 hours, and I was running on airport coffee and something I could not entirely account for. A restlessness, a forward pull. The specific feeling of wanting to arrive somewhere before you fully admitted that's where you're going. The lobby was glass-fronted. I could see the reception desk, the elevator bank, the long corridor that ran toward the open plan. I was reaching for my badge when the elevator opened and Sylvie walked out with a folder under her arm and her eyes on her phone. And then she looked up. She stopped. I don't know what my face was doing. I know what hers did. It moved through something fast. Surprise first, then something softer underneath it. The kind of expression people wear when they see something they'd been privately hoping for, without letting themselves fully hope. Then, she was walking toward me. Fast, the folder hit the reception desk without her looking at it. The phone went into her pocket. She came through the lobby doors, and she walked straight into me, and her arms went around my shoulders, and her face pressed into my collar. And she didn't say a word. Just held on. I stood there for a second. The honest, stupid second, where a man who has been telling himself a story for 8 months recalibrates against reality. Then I dropped my bag, and I put my arms around her, and I held her back. She was trembling slightly, not dramatically. Just the small, physical honesty of a body that has been carrying tension it wasn't aware of until the tension released. "You're early," she said, against my shoulder. 2 weeks, I said. "You didn't tell anyone." No, she pulled back far enough to look at me. Not far enough to let go. Her hands were still on my arms. There was something in her face I had not seen at 11-hour remove across an email chain, something that did not compress to text. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked. Her voice was even. Her fingers were not. They tightened once, very slightly, on my sleeve. I said the honest thing, which was, I don't know. That was a lie. I knew. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud in the lobby of the office building, with the receptionist pretending to look at her screen and the elevator chiming quietly behind us. She made me put my bag in the storage room and take the afternoon. Not a suggestion. Sylvie in manager mode was a specific register, and this was it, except with something different underneath it that she was not addressing and I was not going to force. She had at 2 o'clock she couldn't move. She would find me after. I found a coffee shop on the corner, ordered something I didn't taste, and sat with my phone face down and thought about the folder she'd dropped without looking at it. The thought that followed I had the decency to be mildly alarmed by. Then I had it again. I called my brother, because he is the kind of person who gives practical advice and does not make it weird. I told him I'd gotten back early. He asked if everything was okay with the project. I said yes. There was a pause. He said, "That's not why you called, is it?" I said no. He said, "Is it the boss?" I said, "I'm not doing this." He laughed for about 15 seconds. That was the end of the call. It was a useful 11 minutes. It confirmed the thing I already knew, which was that I was not confused about what I was feeling. I was just not sure what to do with it. I sat there longer than I needed to. The coffee shop filled up and emptied and filled again. I thought about the lobby. I thought about the way she'd moved. No hesitation, no performance of being surprised and then recovering. Just straight across the floor and into me. Like the distance between us had been a problem she'd been waiting for a reason to close. I thought about the folder. The emails between us over those 4 months had been, by any reasonable standard, professional. She had asked about load-bearing tolerances, and I had answered. I had flagged a client concern, and she had advised. There were maybe 140 of them across 4 months, some brief, some not. I had kept them all in a folder of my own. I had told myself this was for project reference. There is something clarifying about being on the other side of the world for 4 months. The things you tell yourself in a comfortable office with the usual architecture of professional life around you to make them plausible. Those things sound different at 2 a.m. in a Lagos hotel room. Smaller, less convincing. I had known, somewhere around week 5 or 6, that what I felt for Sylvie Okafor was not professional admiration. I had continued telling myself it was, because she was my manager, because complicating it would complicate everything, because she was careful and private and gave no indication, or what I had decided was no indication, that any of this was mutual. I had been, as it turned out, incorrect on that last point. There was the night in week 7 when I'd sent her a message about a structural issue at 11:30 her time, not realizing she'd be in bed, and she had responded in 4 minutes. I'd apologized for the hour. She'd said, "Don't worry, I was up." Then, after a pause, I'm usually up when you send things. I've stopped being surprised by it. I had reread that sentence 6 times and then deliberately moved on. There was the video call in week 9, a standard project check-in, and her colleague Marcus had wandered into the frame behind her and said, loudly, to no one in particular, "Is that Daniel? Tell him the office is depressing without him." She'd looked at the camera in a way that was entirely composed and said, "He heard you, Marcus." And then, after Marcus had drifted back out of frame, she'd looked at the camera again for just a beat too long. I'd noticed. I had filed it under probably nothing and moved on. There was week 11. She'd sent me a photo, no context, no explanation, of a mug she'd found at a weekend market. Squat, hand-thrown, the same deep blue as the one already on her desk. The message with it said only, "Found a replacement for the chipped one. Thought you'd find this unreasonably satisfying." I had found it unreasonably satisfying. I had also spent longer than was warranted thinking about the fact that she'd seen it and thought of me, specifically, and sent it at 9:30 on a Saturday morning when there was no professional reason to be in contact at all. I had not moved on from that one. I had thought about it, on and off, for the remaining 3 weeks of the project. I was thinking about it now, in a coffee shop on the corner, with my empty cup in front of me and the very clear sense that I had been making decisions about this situation with deliberately incomplete information. At 4:15, my phone buzzed. "Free. Come up." I took the stairs. Her office was at the end of the corridor, glass-walled, so you could see who was in there. So she could see the floor. She was at her desk when I knocked, and she looked up and waved me in without the performance of someone who hadn't been thinking about this too. I sat across from her. She closed the folder on her desk. Neither of us said anything for a moment. "How was it?" she asked. "Hard," I said. "Good, the building will not fall down." She smiled. "That's the bar. We cleared it." She was looking at me the way she had looked at me in the lobby, except without the surprise now, just the something underneath. She had a mug on her desk, the blue ceramic one with the small chip in the handle that I had noticed on my first day and never mentioned. She set it down. "You didn't tell anyone you were coming back," she said again. "I told you I didn't." "I know." She paused. I'm asking again because the first answer didn't quite fit. She was sharper than me. She had always been sharper than me. I had, historically, found this attractive in a way that was entirely unhelpful and completely consistent. I said, "You can let me off the hook if you want. We can go back to normal, and I'll debrief with the team tomorrow, and it'll be fine." She looked at me for a long moment. Her fingers were still on the mug. "What if I don't want to let you off the hook?" she said. That hit harder than I expected. She talked first. That's the part I've thought about the most, that she was the one who got there before I did, who said the first true thing, even though the whole architecture of our situation gave her more to lose. She was my manager. She had been careful. She was the kind of person who thought before she spoke, always, and what she said when she finally spoke was not practiced. "There's a folder on my desk from the last 4 months," she said. "Just emails I printed off and never filed." I told myself it was for project reference. She paused. "There's nothing in there about the project." I didn't move. "I knew the time difference," she said, "every time. I knew what time it was for you before I sent anything." She set the mug down very carefully. "That's a thing I know about you now. I don't know what to do with it." I said, "Sylvie." She said, "You can tell me this is work," and I misread it. "I won't argue. I'll be professionally fine. I'd rather know." She looked like a woman who had just realized her own mouth had handed over classified information and was now waiting, very calmly, to find out the consequences. She was steady. She was terrified. She was both of those things in the same body, and it cost her something to stay in the chair and not take it back. I said, "Every girl I've dated felt like a placeholder, like someone I was passing time with, pleasantly, until, I don't know, until something." I looked at her. "You never felt like that. Not for a single day of the 2 years and 8 months I've worked here." She breathed out. "When something good happened on the project," I said, "you were the first person I wanted to tell. When something went sideways, same answer. That's not something I've had before, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to call it what it is." She said, "What is it?" "You know what it is." She looked at me. Then, for the first time since the lobby, her mouth curved into something that was not just professional warmth, something smaller, more private, the smile of a woman who has been hoping for a specific answer and just received it. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. Her hand moved across the desk, slowly. I put mine over it. She turned her palm up. We stayed like that for a moment. Quiet, the office settling around us, the sounds of the floor outside going about its business with no idea what was happening behind the glass. And then her phone lit up on the desk and her sister's name appeared on the screen, and Sylvie looked at it, and then looked at me and said, with perfect composure, "I have to take this." I laughed. I couldn't help it. She answered and said, "Yes, I'm fine." "No, something came up. I will call you back in." She looked at me. "Give me an hour." She hung up. She looked at me again. She sends things in waves. If I don't answer, she sends a wellness check. How many sisters? 2. Both worse than each other. She hadn't moved her hand. You should know that going in. Going in, the phrase sat there between us like a small declaration. She heard it after she said it. The corner of her mouth moved. Sorry, she said. I don't usually. Don't apologize for it, I said. She didn't. 3 months later, the firm's HR policy on relationships became something I read very carefully, and Sylvie navigated with the calm efficiency of a person who had done her homework before we ever had the conversation in her office. There were disclosures. There were adjustments to reporting structure. There was a conversation with her direct superior that she described afterward as professionally fine and personally mortifying. And then it was done, and we went to dinner, and she ordered the things she always ordered, and stole half of mine anyway, which I had not authorized and did not stop. A year after that, on a Saturday morning that smelled like coffee and rain, she was sitting at my kitchen table reading the paper, an actual physical paper, a habit I had learned not to question, and I was watching her and thinking about the lobby, about the folder of printed emails she'd never filed, about a card signed in the back of a cab at 3 a.m. Nothing had changed. The version of us that had circled each other for 8 months in professional language, in careful emails, in meetings where we disagreed about the right answer and both loved it. That version was still us, just named differently, just without the pretending. 2 years later, when people ask how we got together, Sylvie tells the story straight. She says she dropped a folder in the lobby. She says she saw him through the glass and didn't think about it. She just moved. She says she doesn't know why it came out that way after all that time, except that his being there, unexpectedly, in the middle of a Tuesday, felt like something she was done arguing with. I tell people she held on and wouldn't let go. She says I didn't try very hard to pull away. She's right. I had spent 4 months on the other side of the world being very sensible about this, and I was completely done with that. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't new. It had probably always been her. Quiet, patient, filing itself under professional admiration until neither of us was willing to keep the label. It felt late. Late in the best possible way. What would you have done if your boss walked into your arms in the middle of a Tuesday lobby and wouldn't let go? And have you ever loved someone from a careful distance, for longer than you meant to, without quite admitting what you were doing? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.